The slowest poison is the one you sip daily. It doesn't taste bitter. It's not obvious. It hides behind good intentions, comfortable routines, and socially acceptable excuses. But one day, you wake up, look in the mirror, and wonder why your ambitions feel like ghosts, present but unreachable. Let me tell you about Marcus. Brilliant in university, sharp in conversation, always working on something. 5 years later, he's still working on something, still reading, still researching, still planning. But nothing is done. Potential, like a fruit left on the tree too long, has rotted into regret. What happened? Marcus didn't fail from lack of intelligence, opportunity, or passion. He was consumed by a silent saboteur, a habit that mimics progress while delivering stagnation. And the cruelest part, you probably have it too. It begins subtly. A podcast on your morning walk, a video essay while you eat, a long thread on productivity, success, or mindset as you lie in bed. You justify it all. It's educational, it's helping you grow. It's better than watching reality TV or scrolling mindlessly. And in a way, you're right, it feels better. It feels intentional. But that's the problem, it only feels like progress. You read 5 books this month, listen to hours of interviews, and save dozens of quotes. You tell yourself you're learning, you are, but you aren't moving. The mind is getting heavier, bloated with data, references, and wisdom from others, but you've barely acted on any of it. There is no muscle being built, no calluses from effort, no real-world friction that sharpens insight into mastery. What you have is a museum of information, beautifully arranged and rarely visited. This is the illusion of progress, and it is the most seductive lie you can tell yourself. It's reinforced everywhere. The self-help industry worships knowledge. Schools train us to consume, memorize, and regurgitate. Social media rewards those who speak well, not those who act well. You've learned to believe that knowing is the first step to doing. And while that's true in theory, in reality, the longer you delay the doing, the more the knowing becomes its own cage. Think back. How many times have you read a book and felt inspired? You highlight paragraphs, scribble notes in the margins, even talk about it with friends. But then a week passes. 2 weeks. Nothing has changed. Your behavior, your choices, your output, all the same. That surge of clarity you felt was a mental sugar rush. It faded, and you're back to square one, but now with more quotes in your head. We're trained to equate motion with momentum. But motion is not momentum. Reading about writing is not writing. Studying business is not starting one. Learning how to meditate is not meditating. These are not the same. One gives you the sensation of progress. The other carves scars into your growth. The dangerous part is how so socially acceptable this illusion is. You get praised for it. You can spend years consuming, analyzing, preparing, and people will still admire your discipline. They'll say you're focused, intelligent, deep, and in the quiet corners of your mind, you'll believe them. You'll pat yourself on the back for being on the path. But the truth remains, you're walking in circles on a treadmill made of ideas. Modern culture has turned overconsumption into virtue. People flex their reading lists, tweet their summaries, and curate their digital libraries. But the question is not how much you know, it's how much you've done with what you know. Wisdom unused is no different than ignorance. In fact, it might be worse because it creates the illusion that you're evolving, a false sense of superiority, a mask. This illusion infects not just individuals, but entire collectives. Teams, companies, even industries fall victim. Endless strategy meetings with no action, market research that drowns risk-taking, feedback loops that keep everyone talking but nobody moving. The result, stagnation wearing the costume of diligence. You know the feeling. That quiet anxiety when you realize your to-do list hasn't changed in weeks. Even though you've consumed amount of new information, you're smarter but not sharper, fuller but not faster. The mind is more cluttered, not clearer. You're trapped in a cycle of productive distraction. And the cycle is reinforced by fear. Because consumption feels safe, there's no failure in watching a tutorial, no rejection in reading another article, no discomfort in listening to a podcast. But as soon as you try, truly try, you expose yourself to mistakes, to judgment, off, to the harsh reality that maybe you're not as ready as you thought. So you return to the library of comfort and tell yourself, just a little more prep. The illusion deepens with tools, apps that track your habits, courses that promise transformation, systems that optimize your learning. You build a fortress of readiness. But when it's time to act, you hesitate. The fortress becomes a prison. You're not preparing anymore. You're hiding. There's nothing wrong with learning. Knowledge is powerful. But knowledge without direction is noise. Knowledge without action is decay. Real progress feels different. It's uncomfortable, messy, uncertain. When you're truly growing, it doesn't feel clean. It feels like struggle, like fumbling in the dark with the vague hope of finding light. That's how real progress happens. Not by knowing more, but by doing more, by falling, by adapting, by failing forward. You have to ask yourself hard questions. How much of what you've consumed has translated into results? When was the last time you applied what you learned with full commitment, not just dabbling? Have you created more than you've consumed this week, this month, this year? The most dangerous thing about the illusion of progress is how well it hides itself. It wears the face of growth, discipline, and ambition, but its hands are empty. Its footsteps lead nowhere. You can live inside this illusion for years, mistaking motion for movement, and by the time you realize it, you've lost precious time, time that no amount of wisdom can buy back. It doesn't show at first. In fact, it feels good, like you're feeding yourself something necessary. You devour a new podcast on high performance during your commute, bookmark another leadership book, save 20 Instagram carousels on emotional intelligence, watch 3 TED Talks back to back on mastering your craft. You feel full, mentally full. You tell yourself this is what growth feels like. But the truth is, you're getting heavy, not sharp. And like a body that's been overworked and never trained, the mind can become soft, slow, and sluggish under the weight of unprocessed knowledge. We live in a time where information is not just abundant, it's infinite. At any hour of the day, you can find a guide on how to be better at anything. You can Google strategies, download PDFs, enroll in 5 online courses before breakfast. The supply is endless, and because it's so easy to access, it's tempting to just keep consuming. You believe the more you know, the more powerful you become. But power doesn't come from storage. It comes from motion, application, transformation. Otherwise, you become like a warehouse of unused tools. Impressive from the outside, but inert on the inside. Mental obesity is not just about how much you take in. It's about how little you burn. Every piece of knowledge you absorb but don't use becomes weight. Every insight you underline but never act on becomes clutter. Your brain starts to feel like an overstuffed attic, filled with valuable things you never use, things you don't even remember are there. And when the moment comes to act decisively, to create something, to respond, to lead, you hesitate. Not because you don't know what to do, but because there's too much in the way. Too many ideas fighting for attention. Too many frameworks. Too many shoulds echoing in your head. You start questioning which method to use, which theory applies, what someone else said in a video, instead of trusting your own judgment. You second guess not from a lack of preparation, but from an overload of it. The signal is buried beneath the noise. You've trained yourself to be a student, not a practitioner. It's a quiet kind of paralysis. You're not doing nothing. You're doing something all the time. But it's the kind of something that doesn't stretch you. It doesn't risk failure. It doesn't produce output. It's input with output, digestion without movement. And just like physical inactivity leads to disease, mental inactivity leads to stagnation. You stop growing, not because you're not learning, but because you're not living what you learn. You see this everywhere. People who are walking encyclopedias, articulate, will read, always quoting someone smarter than themselves. And yet they haven't built anything. They haven't launched, created, led, or risked. Their intelligence has become ornamental, like expensive equipment never used. Their potential is visible in theory, but invisible in results. And it's easy to fall into this trap because society now rewards this kind of consumption. You're applauded for your knowledge, your insights, your hot takes. You get likes for sharing your latest read, comments praising your summaries of dense books. But all of that is surface level feedback. It's validation without verification. You feel clever, but you're not getting sharper. You're just getting heavier. The mind is a tool meant to be exercised, not just fed. If all you do is consume, you rob yourself of the clarity and strength that only comes from doing hard things. From testing ideas in the real world, from stumbling, adjusting, recalibrating, and building mental muscle through effort, not just exposure. There's a reason the people who master their crafts tend to speak simply. They've burned off the excess. They've metabolized what they've learned. They've moved from knowing to being. Contrast that with the mentally obese. You'll notice how they often overcomplicate. They use jargon. They stack ideas on top of ideas, not because they're more advanced, but because they haven't distilled, they haven't done enough to strip things down to their essence. It's in the doing that simplicity is earned. Consumption can only take you so far. Execution is the crucible where clarity is forged. But mental obesity isn't just a personal burden. It affects your relationships, your work, your leadership. If you're constantly analyzing instead of acting, you hesitate in moments that demand decisiveness. You delay when speed is necessary. You talk about potential instead of demonstrating it. And slowly, people stop expecting results from you. They expect reflections, commentary, observations. You become someone who knows what greatness looks like, but not someone who actually moves toward it. This condition also numbs your instinct. When you drown yourself in other people's strategies, philosophies, and techniques, you start to mute your own voice. You stop trusting your gut. You begin filtering every decision through the lens of someone else's framework. And when that happens, you lose your edge. You become a collector of ideas, not a creator of outcomes. There is a cost to all this, and it compounds. Just like the physical body weakens, with prolonged inactivity, the mind dulls. Your attention span shortens. Your tolerance for discomfort decreases. Your ability to commit to one path gets fragmented by the endless buffet of alternatives. You become addicted to switching from one video to the next, one method to another, chasing the next hit of mental stimulation, but never staying long enough to let anything take root. True mastery is born from depth, not breadth. But depth requires focus, repetition, boredom, and challenge, all things that consumption trains you to avoid. The mentally obese avoid discomfort. They look for faster paths, smoother shortcuts, more optimized systems. But the paradox is that the very thing they are running from is what makes knowledge useful. Pain is the gateway to wisdom, not theory, not content, not perfectly color-coded notes. The body tells us when we've eaten too much. It shows up in fatigue, bloating, lack of energy. But the mind is sneakier. Mental obesity often shows up as overthinking, as anxiety, as indecision, as restlessness masked as ambition. And because we're conditioned to treat those symptoms with more knowledge, more advice, more input, we feed the problem while trying to solve it. We double down on the habit that's weakening us, mistaking it for medicine. We don't need more food. We need movement, metabolism, action. If you want to be sharp, you must burn what you consume. Apply it. Suffer through the learning curve. Put skin in the game. Build something that can fail. Test your limits, not just your intellect. There is no substitute for doing. And no amount of knowing can protect you from the lessons that only experience can teach. It's dressed in discipline. It pretends to be noble. It tells you you're being smart, being careful, being strategic. You hold off starting because you want to be ready. You keep researching because the timing isn't right. You delay launching, writing, reaching out, taking that leap. Not because you're lazy, but because you're not quite there yet. That's the story you tell yourself. And you believe it because it sounds rational, responsible, mature, but peel back the layers, and you'll find the same truth hiding beneath it all: fear. Endless preparation is one of the most deceptive forms of self-sabotage. It doesn't feel like avoidance. It feels like planning, like sharpening your blade before the battle. But if you never step onto the field, what's the point of the blade if you spend years preparing for the storm, but never sail? You weren't preparing, you were hiding. There's a comfort in the cocoon of readiness, in the safety of planning mode. It's a world with no real consequences, no real criticism. You can sit in front of your laptop mapping out ideas for months. You can build elaborate systems, beautiful outlines, intricate spreadsheets tracking your non-existent progress. You can research the best platforms, tools, methods, morning routines. It all feels like motion, but it's a loop. A polished, well-organized loop that circles around one thing not starting. And it's everywhere. Artists who spend more time setting up their workspace than creating. Entrepreneurs who keep tweaking their business plan without making a single sale. Writers who draft outlines for books they never begin. Speakers who rehearse endlessly for talks they never book. You've seen it. You've done it. We all have, because taking the first real step means exposing yourself to the possibility that you're not good enough, that your work won't be perfect, that your plan might fail, that your idea might not matter. So instead, stay preparing. The mind is clever. It will give you every justification. You're not stalling. You're being thoughtful. You're not procrastinating. You're building a foundation. You're not scared. You're refining. And yet days pass, weeks, then months. Still no movement, no results. You have notebooks full of plans and potential, but no proof. Just the comforting illusion that one day, when everything is finally aligned, you'll be ready. That day never comes. This habit is reinforced by the world around you. People admire the ones who appear diligent. Friends and colleagues will say, "Wow, you're so organized." When they see your color-coded notes, they'll say, "You're really thinking this through." When you explain why you haven't acted yet, nobody questions it. Nobody tells you you're stalling, because most people are doing the same thing, mistaking preparation for progress, mistaking control for courage. But deep down, if you're honest, when you're crossing the line, when planning turns into avoiding, when refinement becomes a disguise, you feel it in your gut, that quiet tug, the part of you that wonders, what if I just started today, even if it's messy? But then the fear answers, you're not ready yet. And so you return to your notes, your tabs, your checklists, and the loop continues. True preparation has a rhythm. It builds and then it breaks into movement. It has momentum. But endless preparation stagnates. It becomes self-serving. It feeds on itself. You prepare to prepare. You plan your plan. And with each pass through the loop, your fear becomes more embedded, because now the pressure has increased. Now it has to be perfect. You've waited so long, built it up so much, that when you finally do act, it feels like there's no room for error. That's the trap. The longer you stay in preparation mode, the more afraid you become of starting. You attach your identity to the vision, the plan, the idea, but you've never tested any of it. So the idea remains fragile, untouched, romanticized. You don't know if it works in the real world, and that unknown becomes terrifying. Because what happens if it doesn't live up to the image you've held on to? What happens if it fails? And so to protect that fragile image, you keep preparing, because as long as you don't start, you don't fail. As long as you don't try, you don't lose. You get to preserve the fantasy of success without facing the reality of struggle. You stay clean, unscarred, but also untouched by growth. Every successful person you admire started before they felt ready. They acted while still unsure, still imperfect, still raw. They understood something most people avoiding readiness is a myth. You never feel completely ready. The mind will always find a reason to wait, a piece of information still to gather, a weakness to fix, a risk to avoid. If you wait for the feeling of readiness to show up, you'll be waiting forever. Real growth begins the moment you step beyond preparation. The moment you do the thing, not just study it. The first time you hit publish, launch, ask, build, fail. These are the moments that sharpen you, that stretch your capacity, that force you to adapt. You can't plan your way into transformation. You have to walk into it, eyes open, heart pounding, unprepared and fully alive. And yes, it will be messy. Your first draft will be terrible. Your first pitch will fall flat. Your first attempt may not land. That's the point. That's how you gather data. That's how you refine. Not in the lab of theory, but in the arena of action. You course correct as you go. You learn faster when you're on the line. No amount of preparation can teach you what failure, feedback, and momentum will teach you in a single week of doing. The truth is, action reveals what planning cannot. You'll discover flaws in your idea, strengths you didn't know you had, allies you never expected. But none of that happens if you never move, if you let the cloak of endless readiness keep you safe and stuck. There's a simple but brutal reality at play here. The world does not reward potential. It rewards performance. It doesn't care how detailed your plans are, how many notes you've taken, how many books you've read. It cares what you've built, what you've executed, what you've dared to do. You can spend a lifetime in preparation and be forgotten, or you can act, stumble, adapt, and be remembered. You wake up with a list of tasks, important ones, creative ones, maybe even bold ones. At the top is the thing you know you should do, the project you've been meaning to start, the skill you've been meaning to practice, the one action that would actually move the needle. But somehow it's already noon and you've been busy, very busy, very busy. You've answered emails, cleaned up your space, replied to comments, even made an elaborate to-do list. But the thing that matters most, still untouched, you tell yourself, later. Once I clear these small things out of the way, but later never comes, and the day ends the way it always does, full but empty. This is how you bury your potential, by worshiping the small tasks and avoiding the real ones. There's a seductive logic behind this behavior. You feel productive, in control, responsible. You're getting things done, but not the right things. You're running in circles that give you the illusion of motion, but you haven't moved forward. You've just gotten better at avoiding the discomfort of doing what actually matters. Because the real work, the meaningful work, is rarely comfortable. It demands effort, risk, and full presence. The small tasks are easier, safer, familiar. They let you check boxes without exposing yourself to challenge or failure. This habit isn't laziness. It's a form of self-protection. Because real work makes you visible. When you commit to the deep work, the novel, the launch, the training, the pitch, you're putting your reputation, your ability, and your identity on the line. That level of exposure is uncomfortable, so your mind retreats to what feels manageable. You reorganize your files, you update your software, you batch reply to emails. You stay busy to avoid being brave. You may not even realize it's happening. The day moves fast. You tell yourself you're just clearing the deck. That once the clutter is gone, once the inbox is zeroed, once you've replied to everyone, then you'll sit down and do the real thing. But this cycle feeds itself. There's always another small task off, always another piece of low-hanging fruit that feels satisfying in the moment, but costs you your momentum. Your attention becomes fragmented. Your energy leaks out through 1,000 cracks. And by the time you finally have space to focus, you're too tired to begin. This avoidance is especially dangerous because it's invisible. Nobody calls you out for it. In fact, people often praise you. You look like someone who gets things done, someone who's always on top of things. But deep down, you know the truth. You know what you're avoiding. You feel it at the end of the week. That quiet disappointment, that sense that you've been dancing around your edge, but never stepped over it. You've maintained, but not advanced. You've managed, but not grown. Over time, this avoidance becomes a habit. You start each day in reaction mode, tending to the urgent but irrelevant. You become addicted to the dopamine hit of completion, but not fulfillment. You trade significance for convenience. And the longer you do this, the more distant your deeper goals begin to feel. They don't disappear, but they move into a fog. You forget how to start. You lose your grip on what once mattered. And the saddest part, you don't even notice it happening. Think about the last time you finished a day and felt truly proud. Not just relieved that things were done, but genuinely proud of what you moved forward. Those days are rare, not because you lack capacity, but because your energy is siphoned away by things that look like progress but aren't. You tell yourself these tasks are necessary, and some of them are, but they become a shield, a reason not to enter the hard, creative, uncertain territory where your potential actually lives. There's a name for this kind of avoidance. It's productive procrastination. And it's more dangerous than laziness because it hides under the guise of efficiency. You're working, you're sweating, you're on the clock, but nothing real is changing. You're maintaining systems, not building legacies. You're reacting, not initiating. You're caught in the trap of business. And business, while culturally rewarded, is often just resistance in disguise. You may rationalize that you're getting ready or building momentum, but deep work rarely arrives through comfort. It's initiated by force, by sitting down and beginning when your mind tells you to do something easier, by cutting off the noise and choosing the one thing you've been putting off. That one thing that, if completed, would create a ripple effect. Not all tasks are equal. One hard thing is often worth more than 100 easy ones. But hard things demand you show up raw, imperfect, and exposed, off. So you choose safety. You can always feel when the avoidance is happening. There's a low hum of anxiety, a vague itch that nothing you're doing is really moving you. That hum is your potential calling. It's reminding you that your time is finite. That excellence does not come from staying busy. It comes from choosing what matters and attacking it relentlessly. From doing the hard, quiet, slow, and often thankless work that creates breakthroughs. The irony is that the work you're avoiding is almost always the work that would free you. That would simplify your life. That would build the momentum you're craving. But because it's hard, because it's uncertain, because it might not go well, you bury it under piles of convenience. You pretend you're waiting for the right time, for clarity, for energy. But energy is generated by doing, not by waiting. Clarity comes from execution, not from overthinking. Look at the week ahead. If you're honest, you already know what you need to do. The deep thing. The bold move. The thing that scares you a little because it matters. It might be the call you've been avoiding, the pitch you keep rewriting, the creation you've been scared to release. It's the thing that would stretch you, that would make you visible, that would test your readiness. That's the work that counts. Everything else is camouflage. Until you begin to prioritize the uncomfortable over the convenient, you will remain stuck. Busy, but stuck. Full of effort, but empty of momentum. The world rewards those who choose to initiate, not those who organize their lives around avoidance. Your future self doesn't care how many things you checked off today. It only remembers what you built, what you pushed through, what you dared to face. The rest fades. The real work leaves a mark. You hear it in your head all the time, that internal voice with a sharp tongue and a long memory. It doesn't shout. It whispers, and that whisper has weight. It speaks in judgment, in doubt, in half-remembered failures. You really think this is going to work? People are going to see right through you. You've never followed through before. What makes this time different? This voice doesn't need to be loud to dominate you. It just needs to be consistent. It makes itself comfortable in your mind, like it belongs there, like it knows the truth about you. Most people don't recognize how deeply that inner critic has embedded itself, because it doesn't always sound cruel. Sometimes it pretends to be practical, logical, protective. It sounds like wisdom. It tells you to be cautious, to lower your expectations, to play small, just in case. And you listen. You confuse that voice with reason, not realizing it's fear in disguise, A fear so internalized it's become your default setting. What's dangerous is how early that voice begins to form. For many, it starts in childhood, from parents who thought criticism was love, from teachers who rewarded only perfection, from systems that judge worth by performance. Over time, you begin to internalize these messages. You learn to preempt external judgment by turning it inward. If you criticize yourself first, maybe it won't sting as much when others do. You start believing that self-attack is a form of preparation, that if you're hard enough on yourself, you'll never be caught off guard. But this is a lie with a steep cost. The inner critic doesn't make you stronger. It makes you smaller. It shrinks your risk tolerance. It dulls your creativity. It tightens your throat when it's time to speak, weakens your hand, it's time to act, and suffocates your instincts under layers of overanalysis. You become hesitant, tentative, reactive, not because you lack ideas or desire, but because every time you lean forward, that voice yanks you back. It frames your ambition as arrogance. It paints your passion as naivety. It turns your potential into a liability, something to hide, not harness. You may think that the critic keeps you sharp, that it helps you improve, but what it actually does is flood your system with doubt before you even begin. Instead of refining through doing, you stall in judgment. You evaluate ideas before they've matured. You kill momentum before it starts. You rob yourself of learning because you don't allow yourself to fail in the first place. Growth becomes a minefield. Creativity becomes a threat. And you stay stuck, not because you can't move, but because you've been conditioned to believe you shouldn't. You see it play out in your own life. That pitch you didn't send, that opportunity you let pass, that moment you want to speak but said nothing. It wasn't the world that held you back, it was you, or rather the voice inside you that sounded like you, but wasn't. That voice didn't want you to risk rejection. It didn't want you to be exposed. So it told you the worst thing it could, that you weren't ready, that you weren't good enough, that you'd embarrass yourself. And so, once again, you did nothing. People think the battle for potential is about talent or luck or connections. But more often, it's a psychological war between your intention and your inhibition, between your vision and your self-doubt. The inner critic is the gatekeeper of that war. And unless you recognize it for what it is, and name it, challenge it, isolate it, it will run your life from the shadows. It will control what you attempt, what you pursue, what you believe is possible. It will whisper limitations into your future until you've accepted a life that isn't even close to your capacity. What makes this even more insidious is that the critic isn't always hostile. Sometimes it pretends to care. It tells you to wait a little longer until things are more certain. It tells you to be realistic, to manage expectations. It doesn't scream at you to quit. It just nudges you to pause again and again until pausing becomes a lifestyle, and you call it maturity, responsibility, self-awareness. But it's not. It's fear. Wrapped in sophisticated language, just polished enough that you don't question it. You can see the damage in others more easily than in yourself. You meet people filled with intelligence, insight, and depth, yet they hold themselves back. They defer, hesitate, qualify every statement. Not because they're incapable, but because they've lived too long under the voice of internal judgment. It's a tragedy repeated in every field, every generation. Brilliant minds silenced not by oppression from the outside, but by the slow, constant erosion of confidence from the inside. And yet, the irony is this. The people who achieve the most are not the ones who silence the inner critic entirely. They are the ones who learn to hear it and then act anyway. They treat that voice like static, background noise. They recognize it, but they no longer obey it. They've learned that courage isn't the absence of the critic. It's the decision to move forward despite it. To do this, you have to shift how you relate to your inner dialogue. That voice isn't the truth. It's not wisdom. It's a recording, old, glitchy, and unedited, built from outdated fears, inherited beliefs, and protective instincts that no longer serve you. You can listen to it without believing it. You can acknowledge it without surrendering to it. When you hear it say, "You're not ready," you can respond, "Maybe not, but I'm going anyway." When it says, "This might fail," you can answer, "And that's exactly why I need to try." Because here's the true thing your critic will never leave. It's part of you, but it doesn't have to be in charge. You don't need to destroy it. You just need to dethrone it, to stop giving it the final word. Let it speak, and then act in opposition to it. Build the muscle of defiance. Create in spite of doubt. Lead in spite of fear. That's how the needle moves. Every time you act despite the critic, you weaken its hold. You gather evidence that you're more capable than it claims. You develop confidence not as a feeling, but as a byproduct of consistent action. And slowly the voice loses its dominance. It still speaks, but now it competes with another voicing, the voice of experience, of proof. The voice that says, "I've been afraid before, and I did it anyway. This isn't easy." It takes presence, awareness, repetition. You have to catch the voice when it starts spinning its usual stories. You have to name it. Ah, there it is again. And then choose something different. Not louder thoughts, louder actions. You outmaneuver the critic not by arguing with it, but by creating in its presence, by refusing to give it the authority it craves. And each time you do, you reclaim a little more power, a little more agency, a little more of the potential that's been held hostage for far too long. There is a moment in every journey where the most dangerous threat is not failure, rejection, or even external resistance. It's disengagement. Not the loud kind that announces its exit, but the slow kind that erodes your will from within. It starts when the work becomes routine. When the initial fire that drove you fades into something you begin to tolerate rather than feel passionate about. You no longer wake up with urgency. You wake up with habit. You still move, but without spirit. You show up, but you're no longer present. And that is where potential begins to rot, not because it lacks fuel, but because it's no longer being fed. Disengagement masquerades as discipline. You tell yourself that you're doing what you're supposed to. You check the boxes. You deliver. But deep down, you know something's missing. You're no longer pulled by purpose. You're being pushed by obligation. And what was once a living thing becomes mechanical, lifeless, safe, predictable. You're surviving your own dream instead of expanding it. And that's what disengagement does. It seduces you into maintenance mode. The tragedy of disengagement is not just that it halts growth. It's that it convinces you this is how it's supposed to be, that passion fades with time. That excitement is only for beginners. That maturity means settling into the mundane. But this is a lie sold by those who gave up on wonder. Yes, the highs are less frequent as you go deeper, but so are the lows. What replaces them is not apathy, unless you allow it to be. What should replace them is depth, mastery, nuance. But if you don't stay connected to the essence of why you started, depth becomes drudgery. You lose touch with the very soul of your craft. You've likely felt this before. The quiet numbness that creeps in after years of repetition, the fading excitement about things that used to light you up, the sense that you're just going through motions you could once do blindfolded. And you justify it, you tell yourself, it's normal. It's just a phase. And sometimes it is. But sometimes it's a signal, a message from the deeper part of you that something has gone dormant, that what you're doing may still be good, even great, but it no longer feels alive. That feeling isn't wrong. It's sacred. It's a call to reawaken, not abandon, to reinvest, not retreat. But most people don't hear it that way. They interpret it as burnout or boredom and decide they need something new. So they pivot, they quit, they chase novelty. They think the answer is starting over. But novelty is a cheap fix. It distracts from the real issue, that you're disconnected from your own vision. And if you don't fix that, you'll carry the disengagement into the next thing and the next until everything begins to feel the same. The solution isn't always reinvention. Often it's reconnection. You have to go back not to where you began, but to what you felt when you began. You have to remember the hunger, the defiance, the spark, and then you have to feed it again deliberately, not with external praise or validation, but with new challenge, new discomfort, new stakes. Comfort breeds disengagement. It's not failure that dulls your edge, it's safety. There's a reason why the best keep evolving even after success. They know that stagnation doesn't start with loss. It starts with detachment. When you no longer care deeply about the outcome, when you stop stretching, when you stop bleeding a little into the work. They keep risking, not because they're reckless, but because they understand that staying engaged requires danger, not of destruction, but of discovery. You have to risk being changed by what you do. Otherwise, you're not really doing it. Look at the artists, the builders, the thinkers who last, the ones who stay sharp. They don't repeat themselves endlessly. They stay in dialogue with their work. They listen. They push. They challenge their own beliefs. They destroy what no longer serves. And they begin again, not from scratch, but from a higher place. They refuse to let the work become a cage. They refuse to become managers of a process they once loved. That's what keeps them alive. Not their results, but their relationship with the process. It's tempting to just stay the course, to keep doing what works, to become efficient, polished, professional. But professional can be a synonym for disengaged. It can mean you've sanded down the rough edges so much that nothing surprises you anymore. The mess, the mistakes, the moments of not knowing, that's where energy lies. If you eliminate all the chaos, you eliminate the chance of transcendence. And then everything becomes predictable, including you. You might think disengagement happens to people who don't care enough, but often it happens to those who care too much and then protect themselves from the pain of falling short by detaching. They put up a wall between themselves and the work. They hide behind systems, behind schedules, behind performance, because it hurts to love something and not feel inspired by it anymore. But the only way back is through. You have to let yourself feel the disconnect so you can trace its root. Is it fear? Is it resentment? Is it a lack of challenge or a lack of truth? This is where many collapse. They either numb out or burn it down. But the real path is subtler. It requires sitting in the discomfort long enough to ask better questions. What part of me have I stopped bringing to the work? Where have I become a performer instead of a participant? What am I avoiding? And what would it look like to re-enter fully? Re-entry doesn't always mean more effort. Sometimes it means different effort, a shift in intention, a change in rhythm, letting go of what no longer fits, adding new layers, cutting dead weight. Sometimes it's about reconnecting with people who challenge you. Sometimes it's about rediscovering play. Sometimes it's about silence, but always it's about energy. Where is it being drained? Where is it being hoarded? Where is it begging to be released? You can't fake engagement. People feel it. You feel it. There's a texture to someone who's all in, a sharpness, a presence. They move differently. They speak with conviction. They create with tension. And even if their work isn't perfect, it's alive. You can't look away. That's the energy you owe yourself. That's the frequency you have to keep finding again, no matter how far you've come. Because the final threat to your potential isn't that you'll fail. It's that you'll succeed and stop feeling, that you'll build something impressive and forget what it means, that you'll become efficient but not effective, that you'll produce but no longer connect, that you'll live but not engage. This is the slow death, not of talent, but of vitality. And it begins not with a crash, but with a quiet detour into numbness, a place where you still function but no longer feel, where you still perform but no longer transform, where you move but the movement is hollow. And once you go there, the way back isn't easy, but it is possible. And it begins with a decision to stop pretending you're fine and instead to start creating like your soul still matters. Most people will never know the precise moment they let their potential slip through their fingers. It won't be a dramatic fall or some seismic failure. It will be quiet, a glance away from what mattered, a rationalization for why now isn't the time, a decision to wait, to play it safe, to not make noise. They won't remember the day it began, but they'll feel the weight of it later. That haunting question, what if I had just moved when it mattered? You've seen glimpses of who you could be. Not in fantasies, but in those sharp flashes of clarity when everything felt aligned. Your ambition, your instinct, your energy. That version of you isn't a fantasy. It's real. But it only exists through movement, through defiance of the small, invisible habits that chip away at your drive, the postponements, the rationalizations, the slow drift into comfort. And if you don't catch them, they'll write your story in ink before you even notice. There is no savior coming, no ideal day arriving to grant you permission. The door doesn't swing open for those who wait. It unlocks for those who push. You don't need more time, more knowledge, or a perfect plan. You need to stop betraying your own momentum. Stop letting hesitation frame your days. Stop drifting through your routines like a ghost of your former ambition. Look at your life, not with judgment, but with ruthless honesty. Where have you gone numb? Where have you dulled your edge? Where are you merely performing progress while quietly settling? These aren't easy questions, but answering them isn't optional if you plan to build something that matters, because real potential doesn't respond to intention. It responds to decision, to movement, to the raw, unfiltered discomfort of choosing action before certainty. So move, even if it's small, even if it's imperfect. Make the call, write the page, speak the truth, take the risk. You don't owe the world more thoughts. You owe it the evidence of your fire. Let people feel that you're awake. Let them sense it in your presence, your work, your choices, and let yourself feel it again. That pulse that reminds you you are not done, you are not broken, and you are certainly not ordinary. But you will become SOG if you keep waiting,